My first memory growing up was when I was about 4 years old, and I watched a truck pull up in front of my house, and two guys I didn't know, dressed like my dad, started unloading these cases full of television sets. You know, back in those days, there wasn't color TV for anybody because it was a new technology and it was expensive. And yet these guys had a couple hundred color televisions in the back of their truck, and they were just going house to house. Hey, you need a color TV, you need a color TV, you need a color TV. And of course, the people thought it was a joke, but you know, that's just the way it was growing up on the west side of Chicago. Born and raised in a neighborhood they just call Taylor Street. The energy and the flow was don't ask questions, keep your head down, drink lots of water, and everybody's going to prosper. Grandma ran a cigarette store off the front porch. Somebody was always running numbers up and down the street. If somebody got shot, their only concern was getting the body as far from the neighborhood as possible, and nobody saw nothing. As I got older and began to realize that my part of the city was notorious for all the wrong reasons, I kind of embellished or embraced that and enjoyed the fact that, hey, man, I can pretty much do whatever I want in this city. And when a cop stops me, I can just say, hey, I'm from Taylor Street. And they'll say, who's your dad? And you tell them. And then everything was okay. It's just okay. You just leave, you know. So my dad's Italian, born in an area just east of Italy, or just east of Rome, called Abruzzi. And my mom was an alcoholic stay-at-home Irish mom, born in Southern Ireland. And so my entire life, I thought foreplay meant fuck you, no fuck you too. You know, it's just the way it was in an Italian-Irish household. That was probably the most common mixed ethnic background there was in Chicago at that time. Irish and Italians were the scourge of the earth, and so they were regulated to the back of the bus, so to speak, and so they married each other, had kids that looked like me. As I got older, a little bit older, we don't have the types of athletics in school that they have in other parts of the country because of the weather. So boxing or basketball were the two big endeavors for young guys that are trying to be involved in sports. And so I got involved in boxing and turned out I was pretty good at it. Came up in the neighborhood gyms, boxing on Taylor Street and other neighborhood boxing gyms on the west side of Chicago. And as I progressed through the amateur ranks, I was undefeated and did well. The local guys that ran numbers, basically mob guys, started taking notice to me, and then that just exploded. And before you know it, somebody had $20 here, or a guy had $300 there. Well, when you're 12 or 13 years old and a young boxer with good fists, you know, you're making, in my day, good money. You know, I go out 5-6 times a night, make people pay what they owed, and you know, I get a piece of the action. So when you're a 12-year-old kid and you make $150 one night, that's, at that age, that was good money. And so it didn't take long for my enterprising nature to say, well, maybe we can expand this. I came through puberty, got a little bigger, 6 foot, 200-pound kid, and before you know it, they were shipping me out to St. Louis and Milwaukee, and you know, with a street address and saying, go find Louie. And whatever Louie owed, Louie had to pay by any means necessary. So now I started to get noticed to some degree by some of the guys in the neighborhood that had decision-making powers. And before you know it, they were asking me to go for rides with them. And, you know, maybe they had just regular business to do. And they'd say, sit in the car. Maybe they'd say, come with me. And they go talk to a strip club manager or whoever it may be, a union guy. But by having me there, the person they're talking to understood that the young guy was the muscle. And I didn't know it was muscle at the time. But, you know, if they say, here's $500, let's go for a ride. I mean, in the late 70s, for a young kid, that was a good income. You make $500 every night. In those days, you were doing okay. Before you know it, I started to dress like the guys I knew, started to eat where they ate. You know, I picked up their speech patterns because it was cool to be with them. You know, when they go to get their haircut, you go get your haircut because it was just the rite of passage. I came to realize at a very young age that some of these guys were distinguished by being made guys. They were actual mafioso, but in Chicago, we don't really call it the mafia, just the outfit. New York City and Philadelphia, they take a little more interest in the old school terminology, but when all's said and done, it's the same game. It's the exact same game. And so as I was growing up and they saw that I was reliable and I don't drink or do drugs, and, hey, this is a good kid to have around. He keeps his mouth shut. And so before you know it, I was involved in some of the stuff at the Teamsters building, or sometimes I get go to the convention center, McCormick Place in Chicago, and maybe somebody wasn't doing right. Maybe it was a foreman or whatnot. And, I'd ask him to go show me his car. And, what that really meant was he got tuned up that day. And so by the time I was 18, 20 years old, I had understood my value as a guy with fast hands and a boxing background. And it paid dividends for the guys that would take me with them. And I enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed the company. And it was just a way of life. And you reach a point where you start to realize, too, that the women notice you more. You go to a club and you don't wait. Go to a restaurant, you don't wait. Everybody sees you. In Chicago, everybody sees you differently when you're from Taylor Street. And these are your friends and associates. And so as this materialized, I got to be friends with some of the guys that would filter in and out of Taylor Street from other areas. And as unbeknownst to me at the time, a very valuable commodity in Chicago was the Chicago Police Department, because Chicago Police Department may wear a badge and a uniform, but deep inside, they're still criminals. And there was no difference other than the attire between the guy walking the street beat or a homicide detective and the guy that runs Al's Italian Beef over on Taylor. They're all the same people. They just dress different. And so from the realization of that became, for me, a goldmine of business opportunity. So by the time I'm in my early 20s, the relationship between the Chicago police and my boss in Chicago, a guy named Tony Spilatro, was evident in so much as the police would pull up in the back alley and they would come into where we would be. Normally, it would be Tony's restaurant or maybe my father's restaurant, and they would pick up brown paper bags. Now, in the beginning, I had no idea what was in them, and then eventually I'd be the one to take them the bags, or sometimes I'd go meet them and take them the bags, and it was always minimum $10,000 in cash, sometimes 30, 40, 50,000 in cash. And it didn't take long before I was introduced to a crew of coppers that worked on the west side, but never part of the west side of the city, headed by a guy named Steve Manning, who worked directly for my guys on Taylor Street. And in the beginning, I thought it was just muscle people and whatnot. And then one day, I was asked to go for a ride, and I got in the back of what I thought was an unmarked police car. It turns out it was a private car built to look like a police car. And Steve Manning and a guy named Gary Engel pulled over a regular old car coming out of a parking lot of a club. And unbeknownst to me, we followed him for a couple of blocks, and he turned down a dark street, and they hit him with the lights and pulled him over. And when they pulled the car over, I saw them each go to either side, like a regular routine traffic stop. I didn't think twice about it. These are cops. Maybe they saw something they didn't like in the car. And then I saw the flash go off. Bang, bang. They both shot him. They had taken his driver's license and registration, basically his wallet, and they both shot him in the head. They got back in the car like it was nothing. And Steve Manning, I'll never forget, like it was yesterday, reached down and grabbed his Italian beef sandwich and just kept eating as we pulled away from this car. Guy's head's blown off all over the side of the car. And these two coppers had just blasted this guy. And I was, first of all, I know not to ask him what the fuck this guy's problem was, but I was a little shell-shocked. I'm like, what the fuck, man? You could have told me you could have shoot somebody. So we went and went back to my father, who was a made man, and my godfather and my grandfather and Tony Spilatro and another guy named Joey Lombardo. And they sat down. I sat in the living room. They went in the kitchen and talked, and everybody shook hands and walked away. And I saw a couple days later that one of the guys from our neighborhood had been assassinated, and they called it a mob hit, that other gangsters had killed him. And I knew it wasn't gangsters that killed him. It was these two cops. So as this understanding of the dynamic between police and the mob in Chicago set in with me, I started to see the police force differently. You used to respect the badge, the uniform, the beat cop. You go get him some coffee on a cold day. Now you just nod at him and pretend you didn't just see him in your kitchen the night before. It's just a whole different environment, a whole different relationship. And so as this was materializing in my life, I was boxing, I was making good money. I was doing my business for the guys in the neighborhood. And then one day I got a call to come to my father's restaurant, Salvatore's, and went down there, and I was told they were in the basement, so I went down to the basement, and it was one of the two cops and a couple guys I didn't know, and they said, hey, these guys are from Philly. You're going to go out to Philly and you're going to take care of some interests of ours, and they're going to give you some money, and you're going to get back on the airplane and you're going to bring it back. So by this point, I'm in my mid-20s. And so I get on the airplane, fly to Philadelphia. The Chicago cop is there waiting for me at the airport, unbeknownst to me. So we go and we meet these guys from Philadelphia. I go to a restaurant there called Dante and Luigi's, which is in South Philly, the area where you see Rocky run through in the movies. And I sit down and I meet Phil Leonetti. And Phil is the underboss of the Philadelphia Mafia. And so I meet him. We talk for a little while. They give me a banker zipper bag. I put it in the inside pocket of my jacket, that especially for me to carry things on and off airplanes. And I come home. Turns out I brought $250,000 home. Didn't even know. Just the way it went. Sometimes one city had to lend the other cash. Philly and Chicago had a good relationship. We all hated New York City, and that animus resides still in everybody's hearts today. We just don't like New York. They don't like us. It's okay. It's just like having a bad neighbor. You deal with them, but you don't have to like them. So after doing that errand, I started to get more and more calls where they call me into whatever the meeting spot was and say, show me a picture and say, you know this guy? And I'd be like, yeah, I know who he is. Never really talked to him. They say, well, he's in San Diego, or, this guy's down in Miami. Grab one of your guys, handpick somebody. He owes us $100,000 or he owes us $50,000. Go get it. And I said, okay. I mean, I was told to do it by people that I'd grown up with or my father. And, it was just my job. My occupation was to travel the United States and make people come back and pay their debts. And so when I was a younger man, I didn't look like your typical Guido. My nose wasn't pushed to the side yet, and I had a lighter brown hair. So I could walk into a car dealership or some place where these guys were hiding out, and in a suit and tie, nobody even suspected why I was there. They thought I was just a regular customer. They had no idea that I had been sent to, by any means necessary, retrieve our debt. And so this went on for a couple of years, 3-4 years, and very lucrative line of work. I got 25% of whatever I brought back to the city. And so you go twice a week, you're bringing back $100,000 every time. The simple math is, I started to move up in the world, drive a nicer car, live in a nicer place, dating better looking women, because I was a young muscular boxer guy that was making good money. One day, my eventual wife and I were having dinner outdoors at a place on the north side of the city called Jerome's, and beautiful outdoor patio, typical Chicago spring day. It's a beautiful day. And as I'm sitting at this table right on the sidewalk, but elevated, I'm staring at my beautiful fiance, and I see a detective car creeping very slowly. And it's got 4 dicks in it, and you can tell them a mile away. They look like bad porn actors with their bad mustaches and the bulletproof vests, and they're just really creeping. And I can, looking outside my eye, I can see they're staring at our table. And I don't think too much about it. But I lean to my fiance and I say, hey, Maria, a detective car just passed by my motorcycle and they're staring at us really hard. Where'd the detective car go? And naive to the criminal world, she says, I didn't see a detective car. I said, sweetheart, it's 4 white dudes with bad mustaches and bulletproof vests, and they're creeping right past us, staring at this table. Now, I don't want to turn and point at them because then they're made and then they're going to swoop down on me if that's who they're looking for. And I think they probably are because I'm probably the only guy in this patio that's loaded, and the only guy with my type of background. She goes, well, I still don't see a detective car. And at that exact moment, my head was slammed into my salad plate, about as hard as it could possibly be. My ear hits the plate, glass shatters in my ear. I can feel the blood dripping. And a man with a shotgun has jacked the shell into the barrel and is sticking it in my mouth and telling me, move, motherfucker, and I'll blow your head off. And they're all screaming at me. The ones punch me in the back of the head. And total fucking mayhem on a nice spring day in this beautiful outdoor restaurant called Jerome's. And so while my face is buried in the salad, I look up at the side of my eye and I say, sweetheart, that detective car, that car. And she said, well, I didn't see the car. So they jerked me up. I got ranch dressing in my ear. I got salad all in my hair and blood coming down my face. And they're putting handcuffs on me. And the guy says, who's paying for lunch? I say, I am. So he goes, you got money on you? I say, it's in my front right pocket. So he reaches in my pocket and he pulls out a paper clip with money and probably $2,000 in cash. And he just fucking nuts up. What the fuck? I knew you did it. So he hits me back in the head with his pistol one time. These are Chicago cops. Chicago fucking cops. The same guys that we pay to do the right thing. These same motherfuckers are jacking me off in public. And so the one cop says, we got you this time, motherfucker. We got you. We know you did. You did, Jimmy. And now, your goose is cooked. And so as they're jerking me up, as it turns out, Jimmy Bucaleris was found floating in Lake Michigan right off the Chicago River that morning. His body was all bloated and had a broken neck. And so the last time I saw Jimmy Bucaleris, I walked him into his father's bank with a .357 in his ear. And this is before 9/11, so it wasn't uncommon for guys to have guns out, and so especially in Chicago. So I walked Jimmy into his dad's bank and explained to his father that his $20,000 he borrowed to open a hot dog stand turned into a kilo of cocaine. He fucking whiffed it all up his ass, and now he owes me my money plus my juice, and he's got to pay. So I want my money tonight, or something bad's going to happen to your son. Well, as fate would have it, Jimmy freaks out, does a lot more cocaine, and he goes in with his girlfriend and dives in off of the Oak Street Beach and happens to hit head first on the concrete dock that the boats pull up to, breaks his neck, floats out into Lake Michigan for a little while. His girlfriend panics. She breaks for home. They catch Jimmy floating in the lake. And so since I was the last one they saw with him and I had a gun in his ear, they just put 2 and 2 together. So that was the life growing up in Chicago. As it turns out, knock on wood, I was in my family's restaurant when he took his last fatal dive into Lake Michigan. And so I had like 200 people that saw me there working at the time of his death. But it didn't stop them from beating my ass for about 72 hours over at Belmont and Western, a police lockup on the north side of the city near where they found him. And they handcuff you to a little ring that's too low to bend over and be comfortable, and it's too high to sit, plus there's piss all over the lockup room. And so they come in periodically and they'll pepper spray you, hit you with a billy club, spit on you. If you're really fucked up, they'll try and piss on you. But that's life in the lockup in the police station that you never see. And so that went on for like 72 hours until they cleared me. And they just finally came one day and opened the door and said, okay, man, sorry about this. You're free to go. It's like, you cocksuckers. You cocksuckers. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I fucking pay you. I pay you once a week to go do bad shit with me. And you got to put on this fucking dog and pony show. So then I realized too, you don't trust the gangsters, but you really don't trust the cops because they're like hookers. They take your money. Once everybody's got what they wanted, they don't even know you anymore. And so it's just the realization, the conflicting ideals of the people that are there to serve and protect in the city of Chicago, you have to come to, if you're in the life, you have to come to terms with the fact that you cannot trust anybody because it's just one big fucking shit show and everybody wants the dollar. So as I went through life with this understanding, my criminal engagement moved up in the world. I now had a route where I locally would go and collect money in Chicago from all the businesses on the near north side of the city. A guy named Gussie Alex and Alex Dana were running the northwest side of the city at that point. And although I answered to Tony Spilatro down on Taylor Street, the Gussie kind of had control over that part of the city. And so I had a route every day of the week. I would go to certain business entities, and they knew what their debt was. In a bar, it's $1 per seat per day. In a movie theater, it's $1 a seat per day. So they knew at the end of the week, if they had 100 seats, that's $700 a week. Simple math. And you don't have to rough them up. They know. But in return for paying us that money, if they got somebody that's parking in their spot, if they got an employee stealing, if one of their girlfriends gets roughed up by an ex-boyfriend, they don't call the coppers. They just call me. And then we take care of it. And the problem's solved much more permanently that way because the criminal court system will let you out on bail, but we don't have bail. So it was a process that I was beginning to understand. There were wheels, and as long as every wheel turned in the right direction, everybody made money. Like literally everybody made money. And so the people that paid us taxes just charged a little extra for drinks, charged a little extra for their pasta, whatever the case may be. So everybody got paid. As this got expanded, and I'm going twice a week out of town to collect money, and I'm collecting money in the city, I started to figure, look, man, there's plenty of people that I know that have debts out. I can start doing this on my own. And instead of giving 25%, I can get the 75% and just kick up a quarter. So by the time I'm in my late 20s, I meet a guy named Ron Hassey, who is a lead trader for Merrill Lynch in Chicago at the Board of Trade, and very handsome guy, nice guy, but he was gay and he didn't want anybody to know. And Ron Hassey, deep in the bowels of the trading floor before computerized, where everybody traded with hand signals, Ron Hassey had lent out money to other traders that used their clients' money for inside trader information that went south. And these guys tried to make a buck. Sometimes they made a lot, but sometimes they didn't. And the guys that borrowed from Ron, he had like 4 or 5 guys that just told him, fuck you, we're not going to pay you. And so through a mutual friend, Jimmy Palazzi, Jimmy introduced me to Ron Hassey, and Ron Hassey and I, in his beautiful townhouse in Chicago, sat down over a glass of wine, and he explained the problem. You know, some of these loans were $350,000, $400,000. And he's like, hey, man, I can't take that loss. I understand that you get money from people. And I explained to him, look, I get money from people, but these people know they're going to pay. I said, if you want me to force somebody to pay, I'm down, but it's going to cost you. And he's like, look, man, I'll give you half. I'm like, okay, now we're singing. So first day we decided to do this. We determined where we're going to meet and how it's going to go down. And one of my very good friends, Matt LaRocca, was a doorman at a very nice club called Faces in Chicago. This was the Studio 54 of Chicago. And so Matt LaRocca was straight out of Goomba Casting 101. The guy was 6'4", his neck was 30 inches around, his hands looked like catcher's mitts that you'd beaten with a hammer. This guy was the scariest looking motherfucker in the world. But he was such a pussy, all his friends and girlfriends called him doormat because people just walked all over. He wouldn't hurt a fly. But the guys at the Board of Trade didn't know that. I mean, he had his nose broken playing hockey. I mean, he just looked the part. So I took him and bought him a really nice suit at a place called Ultimo in Chicago. He never even owned a suit. Now he's got a Brioni suit on. Bought him some Bruno Magli shoes, got him a pinky ring. He looked like an enforcer. And again, wouldn't say no to somebody that took his last dollar. He's just that timid. So Ron Hassey took us to the Board of Trade, and very crowded, very congested. And he pointed out the guy that owed him the $350,000. And I told Ron, just stand in the back and just don't worry about it. We got this. And Doormat didn't even know why we were there. He thought we were just there to do a transaction with a guy. He had no idea the guy was getting squeezed. And so the guy comes off the Board of Trade floor, and I guess for traders, there's one place you go in and go out. You got to dump your jacket. And I told Matt, just stand behind me, don't say nothing. And as the guy comes up, I walked up to him, and I put my hand on his upper arm and leaned into his ear, and I said, look, man, you owe Ron Hassey some money, and today you're going to pay it. And I could see the fear, the utter fear, as he looked over my shoulder at Matt, who wouldn't have said boo to him, that he was about to get broken up. And he's like, I have the money. He started stuttering. He says, I have it at the bank. I said, oh, fuck, no, we're not going to the bank. I said, where's your mom live? And he says, my mom lives out in Stone Park, way out in the suburbs. I'm like, no, that ain't going to work. I said, who do you have in the city right now? He says, well, I have my personal assistant. I said, you call her and tell her she needs to come down here. You can't find your wallet. You do it right now. Well, in those days, we have cell phones. So he goes to pay phone, and he couldn't even hold the handle on the phone as he's trying to put the quarters in. Finally gets it to go in, and the guy's just panicking. She comes down, and I explained it to her nicely. I'm like, look, sweetheart, if you want to see him in this state again, you can go to the bank, and you're going to take out the money he tells you to take out. He's going to call his executive banker. You're going to take that money, and you're going to bring it right here. And my friend's going to go with you. So if you decide to stop along the way and play Jack in the Beanstalk, he's going to make sure that he doesn't see you in this state again. So everybody understands, right? She did what she was told. She went to the bank. She brings the money back. Easy breezy, no problems. She's shaken to the point she can't hold the bag of money. This guy's already pooping his pants. I can smell the feces coming down his pants like he's just literally scared to death. So Ron Hassey is sitting in the corner watching this all go down. And when we leave, we walk right past him as if we don't know him. We jump in a taxi cab, and we go back up to his townhouse. And I paged him from the payphone outside. And he finally makes it home. And he was so happy. I thought he was going to blow us both. And we're like, no, we're good, man, thanks. But he was just ecstatic. Couldn't believe how easily it was to take the money. And I told him, man, people that bully guys because they're gay are guys that don't have it in them. It's the same thing as people that beat women. These aren't tough guys. In Italian, we call them fugazis. They're fakes. So Ron then opened the door to the Willy Wonka chocolate factory with golden tickets, because every one of his guys that he was close with at the Board of Trade had money out. And it didn't take us 2 months, and we'd probably collected $4 or $5 million. And we're getting 75% of that. I only got kicked 25% upstairs. So from there, my business empire took off. And it was all because, by happenstance, I happened to meet a gay trader at Merrill Lynch. Not my circle of friends on any level. The guys I kicked my money up to were just in disbelief that this golden bucket was sitting down there. They were unaware, because we don't trade stocks and bonds. You know, we buy stolen shit. You know, we buy truckfuls of stolen stuff, and then we sell it individually, and we make nickels. These guys are making buckets of dollars. So I never told them who I was shaking down, because that was my area. That was my money. But it got to the point where I was farming out other guys. I was giving them 10%, so I got 15% profit for them just walking in, taking the money, and coming back out. It was easy breezy, easy money. So at this point in my life, I make tons of money. I had moved into the penthouse of a high-rise apartment building downtown that had just opened. It was the happening place called Presidential Towers. I was on the top floor. I had half of the 270-degree view, half the floor up there, and I was living the life. I was engaged to one of the best-looking women in Chicago, an attorney. Life was good. I still had outside interests with girls I was dating, and a young lady that I was dating that lived on the north side of the Gold Coast, nicer area of Chicago, asked me to buy her a car. I told her I wouldn't buy her a car. And so she was also dating a couple other guys with money. And she had asked me again, you know, I want a car, buy me a car. I said no. And so She called the police and said that me and a friend had stolen some of her gold jewelry from her apartment. I'm making $500,000 a month at this point in my life. The last thing I want is some Pop-Tart popping off to the cops I stole something. Turns out of all the fucking cops in the city, I get some hump that knows who I am and decides that he wants to make a name for himself, comes to my family's restaurant and locks me up, arrests me for burglarizing and stealing a couple gold chains from this girl's house. So I go to jail, I post bail, I get out. And for some reason, this copper decides to reach out to a cop named Johnny Rowland. Johnny Rowland was the Chicago head of organized crime. And this guy made his personal mission to stay in my underwear for the next 6 months. He would follow me around. His task force would be at my lobby watching me as I came and I went. I had drawn all this heat behind a couple of gold chains. I'm like, there's something more to it than that. I don't know why they're on me like this, but they are. So as this all went on and all went on, it was getting out of control. And so one day I get a phone call from my godfather and my dad, and they say, hey man, you're hot. And you're hot because Jimmy Pellegrino floated up in the Chicago River, and they think you and Steve Manning killed him. I said, is that right? They said, yeah. I said, I had no hand in killing Jimmy Pellegrino, but I was there when it happened. And they're like, well, you're hot for that. I said, well, how do I play it? They said, you need to get in front of this thing. Call Freddie Cohen was my lawyer at the time, very well-known mob lawyer in Chicago. Said, call Freddie, set it up, go turn yourself in, and we'll have the bail money ready for you. So I go to Freddie Cohen's office, we set it up. February 2nd, 1990, I go with him and another lawyer named Dennis Doherty, and we go and we turn ourselves in to the Chicago PD. Said, if you want me for something, if you got a case you're building on me, arrest me now, print me, book me now, I'm going to post bail, and let's just deal with it, whatever you got, because whatever you're chasing me around for is making no sense. And so they held me in Illinois. They got 72 hours to arraign you. They held me for like 71 half hours, and then they took me downstairs, and there's a court in the same complex, and they charged me with the killing of Jimmy Pellegrino. So I'm sitting in the Cook County jail without bail on a murder that I know I didn't commit. So I wasn't that worried about the outcome of the trial. I had injured my shoulder shortly before going to jail, and they took me on a routine medical appointment, or so I thought. And when I go to this routine medical appointment in the Cook County Jail in Chicago, nobody walks above ground. It's all underground in tunnels. And when you go to and from court, you get to know the tunnels well enough to where you know where your cutoff is for your part of the jail where you live. Cook County Jail is the most populated jail in the United States, by the way. And as you go through these tunnels, as they're taking me to my medical appointment, I noticed that we go down a sub-hallway that no inmates ever go down. I'm like, something's odd here. And then I look at the two guys taking me. One's just a regular county sheriff, and the other one's a sergeant, which is routine, because I'm on a high-powered tank for organized crime guys, high notoriety murder guys. But I don't recognize either one of these two. So in my mind, I'm thinking, am I about to get fucking whacked? Is somebody upset with me that I brought heat to the neighborhood? And so my mind is racing, my heart's pounding, and I think this could be it for me. Like literally the reality that this is exactly how it happens. He fell down the stairs. Oops, he tripped. You're gone. And so I'm paranoid, I'm nervous, and we get to a door that is completely unmarked. And as they put the key in this door, I can see in slow motion, as vividly as it was yesterday, and they pull this door open. I'm thinking for sure, okay, this is it right here. I'm about to get killed. And my mind races. I can see my wife, my two young boys. I think for sure I'm going to die. And as they open the door, I see a staircase, but nothing at the end of it. I'm like, okay, this is it. Here I go. And I thought to myself, okay, you know what? I led a great life. And the one goes in front, and when the one got behind me, I was just waiting to feel it. I for sure thought I was going to get stabbed in the neck. And the one in front turned sideways and opens an unmarked door, and it's a whole office that looks like the room where Barack Obama watched the killing of Osama bin Laden. And it was full of people, law enforcement people. And I was like, son of a bitch. Now my heart's really pounding. They walk me in, they take me off to the side to this conference room, and around this conference room are all FBI. In my mind, I'm thinking something's really bad about to happen. And so I walk in, and the one guy stands up, and he sticks his hand out. He says, my name's Tom Gankars. I'm with the Department of Justice. And I know not to say a word, not even hello. So I just nod at him. He says, you know why I'm here? I again, didn't respond. Tall guy, handsome guy. Looked like Mueller, the guy from the head of the FBI that fucked over Hillary Clinton, just like him. Same demeanor, too. I think they teach boring demeanor at FBI school. So he says, I understand you're close friends with Steve Manning and Gary Engel and Ron Terakowski, Ricky Randazzo, all dirty cops. Again, I'm trying to keep my face poker. And he says, okay, you don't have to talk to me if you don't want to, but you're going to go down on the Pellegrino murder. And if we get a hair up our ass, we're going to book you with the Carmine and Glazy murder out on North Avenue in Harlem at Horwath. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, what the fuck is going on? He said, and if you don't sit down and talk to us, we're going to have a press conference and say that you're cooperating with the FBI, and you'll get killed tomorrow. So those are kind of your two choices. So we're either going to book you with several murders, whether you did them or not, we don't give a fuck. We're the FBI, we make them stick. Or you're going to tell us to go fuck ourselves, and then we're just going to tell the world that you're a rat and that you're cooperating. So at this point, my only thing I could think of to say is, I need to call my lawyer. And he's like, we thought you'd say that. And this is before cell phones. So he pushes the rotary dial phone in front of me that I am quite sure everybody from Helen Keller to the Pentagon to Jimmy Hoffa is going to listen to this phone call. So I call my lawyer's office, and I get Freddie Cohen on the phone. I'm like, hey, man, I'm sitting in a room full of fucking FBI agents that want to talk about these dirty coppers. And Freddie's first question out of any good lawyer's mouth, have you said anything to him? I was like, no, I didn't say hello. He's like, where are you? I said, I'm in the county jail. He said, let me talk to whoever's talking to you. So I hand him the phone. And they talk for a minute, and then he hands me the phone back, and Fred says, I'm on the way down there. He says, ask to be put in a separate room. Whatever, I'm sure they have a holding tank, ask for a separate room. So I do, and they do. They put me in this filthy, fucking dirty side room. And however long it took. By the way, Freddie Cohn, 6'2", 400 pound, one-eyed, cyclopic Jew lawyer from Chicago. He, the antithesis of shiesty-looking, oversuited lawyer. This guy's shirt was never tucked in. He always had mustard on his shirt. But he was the smartest man I ever met in my life. This guy could look at you for 30 seconds and know what you're up to. He was really a smart guy. God bless him, rest in peace. And he had integrity. So Freddie finally shows up, food on his shirt, mammoth, his arms rested on his side boobs, shows up, and they open the door. Freddie's standing there, and he comes in. They shut the door, and he's like, don't say nothing because I'm sure the room's wired. He says, they're not after you. They're after these cops, and they want you to wear a wire against these cops. And I'm like, no, fucker. No one's going to wear a wire. These guys are fucking maniacs. And he's like, well, if you don't, you're going to die in prison, and you may die soon. He said, it's really, they got you by the balls, kid. And I'm like, well, why me? Why are you talking to me about this? And why are they talking to me about it? And he said, look, you're the baby in the crew. You've got the longest shelf life. If they're going to flip somebody, they'd rather have you testifying for the next 20 years than some 80-year-old man that can barely breathe that could croak tomorrow. Said, this is how they get down. And if you say no, they'll go to the next guy, but they'll fuck you real hard. I'm like, well, what are my options? He's like, you don't have any options. I said, have you told Sal or my dad that this is going on? He's like, no. He said, I'm going to tell the FBI to take a hike. I'm going to talk to you privately. Then we'll get your, Sal was my godfather. And then my father and then my uncle, all bosses in the mob. And he said, let me talk to them and get a handle on this. So we went back in there. My lawyer told the FBI, look, man, you can't talk to him anymore. You know, I'm his attorney. This stops. And we understand the dynamic. I need to go talk to some people, and then I will contact you. So my knees are knocking. I'm nervous. My mouth's so dry I can't even talk. And the FBI all get up. Not a goodbye, not nothing. Rank and file. They all march out like the parade of dickheads that they are. And so they all march out of the room. Room door closes, and Fred reminded me again, this room is being recorded, so just don't say anything. He explained that he would go talk to the people that make the decisions in my life on the criminal level and decide how we want to play this. So he comes to visit me next day in the jail. When he comes to visit me next day in the jail, he says, okay, I sat down with everybody, and as long as it's just the cops and no one else, he said they want you to cooperate because they're tired of the shenanigans they pull anyway. They can always get new cops, but they can't get another you. And so they'd rather keep you and let the cops go. So we're going to meet with the FBI again, and when we meet with them again, we're going to lay out the parameters of how this is all going to go down and what your benefit is. He said, I'm not going to let you make any deals unless you are getting out of jail and you get paid, because what you're about to do will probably get you killed. He said, no one else has ever done it. And there's a reason for that. And so he left, and I went back to my housing unit, scared to fucking death. I've never been afraid of anything in my life. I was petrified. Like, are people staring at me? Does anyone know? Like, do these jail guards know? Like, who knows that the FBI was here? Someone's got to know. Someone had to see him come in. My mind's racing. So the very next day, I'm in my cell. Now, this is all high-power classified inmates, guys that are either really fucked up, did bad things to kids or whatever, or mobsters or really big gang leaders are on this particular unit in the Cook County Jail. And when someone comes in new, you can hear the clanging of the heavy metal doors. And then you can hear down the hallway when they're telling somebody what their cell assignment is. Literally right across the hall from me. They had moved a guy out of that cell that morning, and lo and behold, here comes Steve Manning carrying all his shit. I'm like, son of a bitch, son of a bitch, son of a bitch. So now I know how this is going to go down. So he unpacks his stuff, and I see him walk down the hallway, and he walks by, and he sees me sitting on my bunk reading a book. And he walks up, and he's like, hey. I look up, I'm like, hey. And now my mind's racing, like, what does he know? He's a cop. You know, cops know other people's business. And he's like, I heard they pinched you. I'm like, yeah. I said, what about you? He said, yeah. I said, same case. He said, anyone come talk to you yet? I said, just Freddie, because everyone knew my lawyer. He had Joseph DiNatale, another mob lawyer. Everyone knew Joey DiNatale. We just call him Joey D. So he stayed at my bars for a little bit, and he was giving me like strange looks, like, you know, I wonder if Tommy said anything. And I'm looking at him like, what does he know? And then the sheriff told him, go lock it up, go in your cell and shut the door. And so he did. And as he goes and shuts his door, we talked across the hallway as much as we were able for a little bit. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, they're not going to let me out of jail. They're going to bring the rest of these fuckers up here, and I'm going to have to wear a wire inside the jail. That's the only reason they would have put me and Steve on the same tier. Lo and behold, the next day I get called out to a medical trip. This time I knew. I was so fucking nervous. My mouth was so dry I couldn't talk. Same two guys who it turned out were FBI agents. They weren't even county sheriffs. Walked me through the belly of the beast at the county jail. We popped back up. But this time, it's not just Tom Gankars. It is leading the show. It's Special Agent Gary Miller and Special Agent Bob Buchan of the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force. And they introduced themselves, and they're acting, oh, shucks, hey, buddy, you hungry? You want a cup of coffee? You want a cigarette? I'm like, I don't smoke. I'm not hungry, and fuck you. And they're just being nice as they could be. One looked like Rick Moranis, and the other one looked like the guys from Lenny and Squiggy. Just two meatball, dumb fuck, never should be organized crime. But they sat down, they laid it out. Look, man, what you don't know is that Steve was going to eventually kill you because you were there for half his murders. You were going to die. And we know you're going to die because we have it on tape. We've been taping him for a while. But what we don't have is a live witness that can go and testify. I watched him kill people. Steve Manning was the head of this crew of cops, about 8 of them. They killed people for money for the Chicago mob. And although there were other police that they were looking for, it was really Steve that they were on. He stabbed his father 176 times with an ice pick because he wanted the family fortune sooner than waiting for his dad to die. He killed so many people. Steve would go to Vegas to collect money, and whoever went with him would wind up with their fucking head cut off in the desert of Vegas, just so he could keep all the return money for himself. The guy was just a brutal son of a bitch. 6'3", barrel-chested. If you saw him in street clothes, you knew he was a cop. He was just a big, rough, tough guy. So anyway, Bob Buchanan did most of the talking and explained, we want you to wear wire inside the Cook County Jail. But there's no transmitter. So it's just you and these guys. And if something goes wrong, fight your way out of it. Now, in my mind, everyone in Cook County Jail's got a knife. Everybody. I got one on me right now. Everybody had a weapon. If they caught me wearing a wire, I would have looked like bloody cottage cheese, and they wouldn't have been able to identify my body. But then he explained it to me in the most simplistic terms, and I can still hear him in my ear now. He said, and if you don't do it, tonight we will hold a press conference in front of a drape at the U.S. Department of Justice Office for the Attorney General or United States Attorney, and we're going to say that you're cooperating in matters in Chicago, New York, and Philadelphia, and that you've been cooperating for the last year and a half. And so they'll just kill you tonight because they have news in the jails. He said, so those are your two options. But if you do it and you successfully get us what we want, we're going to let you out of jail. We're going to change your name. We'll put you away. Your family will be put away. Everybody's going to be safe. And you'll be comfortable, and we'll wipe your record clean. No one will ever know that you've been in trouble before. And so I asked him if I could take a break. He said, yeah. They left the room. I asked my lawyer, Freddie Cohn, what do you think? Do you trust these guys? He said, well, we get what's called a proffer. It's a letter between law enforcement and the criminal defense attorneys for guys like me. And the proffer is signed by a judge saying, if you do what you're asked to do, they have to honor it. It's a legal precedent. And so it was my only ticket out. There was no other option. So literally that morning, unsuspected to be going in, they opened her briefcase and they had duct tape, a Swiss-made Nagra recorder that weighs as much as a fucking 2.5-pound dumbbell. They had some wires and some sharp scissors. And I'm like, dude, it looks like you're going to fucking amputate or something. They said, no, we're going to tape this up under your balls on your thigh. We're going to tape it there and you're going to keep it for 6 weeks under your nuts. We're going to hope it don't slide out, but if it does, we're going to send you home with some duct tape. And I'm thinking to myself, this is the most Mickey Mouse fucking, this is the FBI. This is the biggest law enforcement in the world, maybe outside the KGB. I'm like, you guys are Mickey Mouse as fuck. So as a boxer, as a guy that's working out constantly, I got these massive thighs, I can barely get my boxers on. What are you going to, how are we going to do this? He's like, oh, that's what the scissors are for. We're going to cut a hole in your boxers. We're going to tape this to your leg. Oh, and by the way, you can't take a shower for 6 weeks. You just got to wash up in your cell. I'm like, if you bumped your fucking head, it's 140 degrees in these jail cells. I said, I sweat like a fucking, crazy. He said, no, it's not going to happen. They're like, well, this is how we do it. So you're either going to do it or you'll get killed in here. And your family's going to catch hell because they're going to think you're a rat. So everyone's ostracized. It's going to be all bad. On that day, I knew I'd sold myself to the devil. My soul no longer belonged to me. It belonged to the fucking Department of Justice. And as they're wrapping this duct tape around my thigh, two weirdos, they got my balls just hanging in their forehead like it's normal. They're taping this fucking thing to my thigh, and they're showing me how the wires, it's not like what you see on TV where the wires come up here. Wires actually come up inside your waistband. And so they put the wires up there, they duct tape it to my stomach, they duct tape this thing on my thigh, and they tell me, once this is on, it has to just keep running. And it has these little Nagra recorder cassette tapes. Every time it shuts off, you go in your cell, you shut the door, and you cut the thing off of you, you change the tape, and then you tape yourself back up. And I'm trying to explain to them, the sound of duct tape, I'm going to draw heat. Someone's going to hear that shit. They're like, well, you'll make it. You're a smart guy. And then in my mind, I'm thinking, this is the best we got. This is America's pride and joy, law enforcement, FBI. So we're all done. The two fake sheriffs take me back to my unit. And as I walk up in there, I don't know what to fucking do. They just said, don't ask questions, just let them talk. And then if they talk, then you can ask them what they're talking about. But you can't start a new topic. I go up there, first thing out of one of the other cops' mouth was, so you went to the doctor, huh? And in my mind, I'm paranoid. I'm thinking, does he know I didn't go to the doctor? Does he know where I was? And I'm like, yeah. I said, the shoulder's still fucked up. He says, it don't look fucked up. He was here, let me, like now I'm thinking, fuck, do they know? Like, do they know? And I'm scared to death. So I proceed to walk as quickly as possible without being obvious back to my cell. My heart's palpitating, I'm sweating. I'm like, fuck, this is horrible. And so we go for a walk, and it's so hot in the county jail that nobody wears a shirt. So I got to take my shirt off too. These wires are under my waistband. I'm scared to death. And we start talking about every crime in the world. We start talking about robbing police stations in small towns in Missouri and then going to rob the bank. I mean, these are plans that have been in the process for a while. Start talking about the kidnapping of a guy named Tony Manuelito, who eventually got killed, got murdered. We're talking about all this stuff, and I'm thinking in my mind, fuck, man, we just wish you guys would shut up. Just quit talking about this stuff. I won't be so paranoid. So as I'm wearing a wire, all these dirty cops, we hang out. We work out together. We do it. Now I can't not work out. So here I am doing push-ups with these guys, and I'm thinking to myself, if this thing clangs on the floor and they hear it, like my mind's just racing. It's horrible. So this goes on for the first day, and I can't wait to go back in my fucking room. They lock us up for the night. And I literally took 2 hours gently taking that duct tape off. Like, so quiet. I kept running my hand in the sink and putting water down so it wouldn't make any noise. Doing the best I could. Fine. Oh my God, it's off of me. I'm looking at it with such scorn and disdain. So I had to change the cassette. And the deal was that a fake sheriff for the sheriff's department, who was actually FBI, his name was Jimmy Moran, would come by the outer portion of the tier on a catwalk to count us at night. I took a book out of my bars on that catwalk, and they'd given me a box cutter, and I cut out the center of the pages. I put the cassette in there, and I put the recorded cassette in the book, and they would give me a fresh couple of cassettes to put back in the recording device. As Mickey Mouse as it could possibly be. Nobody in a white van listening. Just, you record this conversation. If you get caught, we'll find somebody else. It was horrible. So this went on for weeks, then months, 6 months. I sat in that fucking county jail, no bail, recording every word. And sadly, other guys, Carl Gallo, a gangster, not even in the investigation, walks up to me one day crying about he doesn't know what to do. So this guy lays out his entire fucking case on tape. I'm thinking to myself, fucking Carl, you dumb fuck. You dumb fuck. And he did. He got the death penalty for it. Other guys are talking to me about, because you talk about crime in jail. It's what you talk about, right? You lie about your accolades, but you tell the truth about your fucking crime. And then you try and help each other figure out how to wiggle dick out of it. And so as this continues on. I've got the entire fucking tier talking about Tommy O'Farrell. Tommy O'Farrell, a cop's kid, and then hit the gun well, hit it in the broiler. They're never going to find it. He lays out the whole fucking case right on the tape. I mean, by the time the prosecutors got done, what started as a target of like 6 cops, I wound up testifying against like 12 people just off that one tape. So this went on for the 6 months, and as this was going on, the FBI was building a case in Kansas City for the kidnapping of 2 big drug dealers and a gangster named Tony Mamalito. And as part of the case, Steve Manning, who trusted me explicitly, unaware I'm wearing a wire against his dumb ass, Steve Manning comes to me and says, look, I know you got this niece, Sylvia. She's a sweetheart and she's a gangster. Said, if you have Sylvia come and testify that I was with her family and her dad on the weekend in February 1990 when we kidnapped and cut these guys up, I'll pay her $200,000 and we'll take good care of her family for now on, because he represents mob activity too. And so I relayed this information to Bob Buchanan of the FBI, and rather than get a fake niece, Sylvia, he talks her into going to meet with this guy's wife and some of his business partners on the street, and they all get together and they're going to buy Sylvia's allegiance to cover for them in a kidnap murder in Kansas City. So this investigation, which starts about just the killing of Jimmy Pellegrino, has now morphed into like just a fucking cornucopia of bad acts by the police and their stupidity in the way they try to cover it up. And so the FBI goes and sits on the restaurant. They're like 40 deep in this restaurant, the Italian Village in Chicago. It's downtown, it's on Monroe, right in the Loop. And FBI's, every patron in the restaurant is fucking FBI. And they're mic'd up. There's mics under the table everywhere. And the family of the dirty cops go into this super detail about other murders. Like literally, you couldn't have asked for a dumber group of criminals as they go ahead and tell the world who they killed, where they chopped them up. Steve had gotten a fake storefront. There's a restaurant down in the basement. He had a meat grinder where he would take the guys that he had to kill and he'd grind them up and turn them into fertilizer. And he's laying it, his wife's laying it out. One of his business partners laying it out. Sylvia has a presence of mind saying, wasn't that on the north side? They say, yeah, on North Clark up in Andersonville. And the guy says, yeah, it's at 5610 North Clark. Like they fucking give him a blueprint map how to go find a bunch of DNA for dead people. So all this culminates in the indictment of Steve and his crew of dirty cops for multiple murders, racketeering, and all the various predicate crimes that go with that. Once we got back to court, and it was time for trial, these guys didn't stand a chance. Manning, being the main target, got convicted and given the death penalty in Illinois. In the same time period, he was also charged with kidnap murder in Missouri. And so 4 cops all wound up with the death penalty, all wound up on death row. 3 stayed in Illinois. Steve got shipped out to Missouri, to Jefferson City, Missouri, and faced that case. And they left him on death row there. So Steve was smart. He had saved his money for the appellate process, hired the best appellate lawyers in the country. They got him a new trial. He overturned his case in Missouri, and then they came to Illinois. And when they came back to Illinois, the FBI contacted me. By the way, by this time, I had been freed from custody for a crime that I didn't actually even commit. And they freed me from custody, put me in witness protection, moved myself and my family to Houston, Texas, under the protection of the U.S. Marshal Service, which is about as comical as Don Knotts playing Barney Fife. That's how protected you are. You're just better off just doing it yourself. New identity. My wife has a new identity. My kids have a new identity. My entire record's wiped clean. I am no longer the person I was. Everything's new.
You're Tommy Dye now?
I'm Tommy Dye now, yes. And so as I by the way, not the name I was born with.
Right.
So I'm living in suburban Houston, Texas, an Italian boy from Chicago, just not fitting in. The FBI contacts me and says, you have to come back and testify. They're going to retry Manning in the Illinois murders. And I said, I'm not going to do it. It's not going to happen. You guys have ruined my life. You put me in jail for something that never happened. You admitted that. It was a joke to you, but my wife's raising my 2 young boys without me there because you needed someone to put these guys away. So I'm not going to do it. So as this battle waged, Steve hired a very prominent law firm, Lovey and Lovey, out of Chicago, that sues for wrongful convictions. So when they filed suit in the wrongful conviction in the United States versus Stephen Manning, the next morning I'm arrested as part of the witness protection program and flown back to Chicago to deal with the prosecutors there. They were trying to strong-arm me into testifying against him, and I wouldn't do it. So they didn't have a crime against me in Illinois. So the prosecutor said, well, California has a 3 strikes law. We're going to charge them with something out there. They flew me to San Diego, and the Chicago DAs continued to pressure me to testify against Steve Manning in the retrial of the killing of Jimmy Pellegrino. And when I flat out said, I'm not going to do it, it's not going to happen, they charged me with stealing my then girlfriend's car and taking it for 48 hours. Under California statute, if I took the keys from the home, it was a burglary, which is a strikeable offense. So they charged me under the 3 strikes law. And while they held the 3 strike sentencing over my head, they continued to pressure me. I refused to testify again, any more criminal trials of any kind. But in the meantime, Steve Manning's lawyers, Lovey and Lovey, it came time for the trial against the FBI. And this is where the criminal justice system finally got exposed to some degree for the complete malfeasance that happens on a daily basis. I was subpoenaed to testify, didn't want to testify against the FBI agents because I knew them. I knew them well. I knew their kids, knew their stories. But I went in there with the knowledge that you've got to tell the truth, because if you lie under oath, you will be charged with the same amount of time as the defendant. That's the law. And so I went in, I told the truth. And when the trial was over, they awarded Steve Manning $6.6 million, even though he did kill Jimmy Pellegrino. The FBI paying myself and the other witnesses roughly $2 million to get him. And the perks that we got, the sex we were allowed to have in the FBI office with our families, the food, the picnics, the staying out of jail for weekends at a time while they babysat us, all got exposed. And so it was a bad black eye on the prosecutorial team in Chicago. And I paid the price. So Manning was awarded $6.6 million. I languished in San Diego fighting this case. I went to trial. Judge saw through what was going on, struck the strikes that I was alleged to have had from my childhood, burglaries in Chicago to various entities where we stole all the merchandise, came out the back of the truck. He struck my strikes, gave me 23 years with halftime. I would have served like 4 or 5 years. The moment the verdict came down with the $6.6 million, the San Diego prosecutors working with the Chicago DAs went to the appellate courts, had my strikes reattached, and I was given 167 years to life for the theft of a car that was gone for 2 days. That's
Really?
a true story. According to my future lawyers, more to come, Mike Romano and Susan Champion at Stanford University's law school, that was the most time ever and still remains the most time ever given to somebody for a property crime in the United States. 167 years to life.
Did you actually steal her car even?
I did take her car. I used it to go on a run up to Los Angeles from San Diego. She knew I was gone, but I was supposed to be back on, say, like a Tuesday. I came back on Wednesday, but by then she thought she wasn't getting her car back, so she called the cops. And when I brought it back, they arrested me, and once they ran my fingerprints and saw who I was, it was too late. And so the prosecutors using leverage against me just kept me there for an innocuous property crime, no bail, maximum security.
But it was really a punishment for not testifying.
It was a punishment for not. It was Chicago retribution for you fuck us, we'll fuck you. It's just the way it's played there. And so I wound up in jail for 22 years. And then one day, Stanford University's lawyers contact me and say, hey, we're going to get you out of jail. And I thought it was a joke. I'd run out of appeals. By this time, I had stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma. I was slowly dying. I looked in the mirror. I'd lost 40 pounds of muscle. Hope is gone. Prison breaks you of hope. My family had all passed away. My wife had divorced me. I'm just a shell. I'm just shuffling through the motions.
What does it feel like to be in prison in that situation?
It's sheer hopelessness. And when you're in jail for that amount of time, your moral compass gets skewed. So if somebody insults you, you don't say that they insulted you. You stab them in the neck with a homemade knife. If a prison guard doesn't give you your mail when you think you've got mail coming, you boil boiling water, you shit in the boiling water, maybe throw a little bleach in there, and when he comes by to pass out food, you throw it in the face. That's what you become in jail after 22 years for stealing a car. You just become numb to permissible conduct. You just don't care. So when Stanford shows up on the scene, I thought it was a joke. I didn't think, who are these people? My best paid appellate lawyers in the world couldn't budge the courts, because I was persona non grata. But the lead lawyer, Susan Champion, she did her work. And as she did her work, I sat in awe and watched her as she took apart my case piece by piece. Various courts, various hearings on their dime until they won me the right to have a parole hearing. So there I was, 22 and a half years in, battling cancer. My family was gone. Life is not at all what it was before I went in. 2.5 decades of prison riots, stabbings, bad food, the worst possible conditions you can imagine. I finally get granted the right to go to a parole hearing. And in California's criminal justice system, the parole board's not there to let you out. The parole board's there to keep you in. And the process is so tainted. You have to be able to psychoanalyze your childhood, the trauma, the effects of trauma on your life, all the wrong you've done in the world, and you have to gut yourself in front of total strangers whose sole purpose in life is to antagonize you. The moment that you return an answer with any type of animosity or anger in your voice, they deny you parole. But I was calm. I sat through the process. It's such a mind fuck when you go through that parole board process. And I fully expected to get 7-year denial, 5-year denial, 3-year denial. I expected 7-year denial because I fucked the feds. Feds are all in my parole process. I'm going to tell it to you for the first time raw. You ready? So I sat through a 7-hour parole hearing. I was asked every difficult question under the sun. Had to bare my soul. Had to admit to crimes that weren't even charged. I had to tell them every rotten thing I'd done in society. And when I was done, they deliberated. And Susan Champion and I talked during the deliberation, and she said, I don't think you're going to make parole. I think they're going to deny you for 7 years because your history with the feds are breathing down their neck to keep you in prison. So when Joe Sullivan, the commissioner from my parole hearing, and Miss Na, the vice commissioner, and the DA came back, the DA had a final statement, and she talked about what a rotten human being I was and how much violence I'd caused the world and how I would do anything for the profit of monetary gain. Susan Champion had a chance to talk and explain to the parole board that it's not the man that goes into prison that you're evaluating. It's the man you're thinking about letting out. And she walked through the laundry list. I got my master's degree in prison. Took 21 and a half years to get. She talked about what I do to help sick inmates, what I do to help the weak inmates, what I do to protect the integrity of staff that come in there every day and risk their lives. She explained I had 0 disciplinary reports in 22 and a half years in prison. And Joe Sullivan was a stand-up guy. He said, under any other circumstances, I would deny your parole for 7 years. But he said, I think I'm going to release a guy that could live next door to me. He said, I find you suitable for parole. And I will tell you that my body went limp, and I thought I didn't hear him right. And I asked him to repeat what he said. He said, I find you suitable for parole. In 6 months, you're going to walk out of prison a free man. And I hope you continue on this path of making your life better than when you came in. And I'll tell you right now, there's not a day that I go to sleep at night. I don't thank God for Joe Sullivan being my commissioner, because I would have died in prison if not for him seeing through the pressure by outside entities and doing the right thing. So today, in witness protection, I reside far from where I got paroled from. But I wake up every morning as a free man. I'm grateful to the people who made that happen. There's so much more to my story. The death penalty was stopped in Illinois because of my testimony. The death penalty on a national level was halted because of my testimony. I wound up testifying in front of the U.S. Congress on wrongful convictions. People were exonerated. People were allowed to go free that the DNA didn't prove them to be guilty. I paid a price of 22 years, but men kept their lives that would have otherwise been executed. So for all the heartache I went through and the violence I endured, it was worth it. And if I had to do it all again, I would do it the exact same way, because the end justified the means. And I hope someday I get to tell the story of just how complicated and how much pressure came from the halting of the death penalty.